Act 1, the mindset shift. Welcome. Settle in. And let's talk about learning in a way that might just change everything you thought you knew. Fact 1. Define good enough clearly. Most people never learn skills quickly because they never actually decide what done looks like. They start learning guitar imagining themselves as virtuosos, or begin a language dreaming of perfect fluency. But here's the thing. When you don't define what good enough means for you, you're chasing a horizon that keeps moving further away. Instead, try this. Ask yourself what you actually need. Maybe good enough at guitar means playing 3 songs around a campfire. Maybe good enough at Spanish means ordering food and asking directions on vacation. When you define your finish line clearly, specifically, measurably, something beautiful happens. The skill stops being this mountain you'll never climb and becomes a hill with a flag at the top. You can see it. You can reach it. And that clarity, that simple act of deciding what's enough, that's where fast learning actually begins. Fact 2. One skill at a time. There's this tempting idea that we can juggle multiple skills at once. Learning piano while also picking up photography, while also getting better at public speaking. And sure, technically you can do that. But here's what actually happens. Your attention fractures. Your progress slows to a crawl across everything. And worst of all, you never get that incredible feeling of real progress, real competence emerging. Think of it like sunlight through a magnifying glass. Spread out, it's just pleasant warmth. But focused on a single point, it can start a fire. When you commit to one skill at a time, you're not limiting yourself. You're giving yourself permission to actually get somewhere, to feel momentum, to wake up noticeably better than you were yesterday. The skills will still be there waiting for you, one after another. But right now, this moment, pick one. Just one. Let everything else wait. Fact 3. Front load. 20 hours of practice. Here's a number that might surprise you. 20 hours. That's roughly how long it takes to go from knowing absolutely nothing about a skill to being, well, not terrible at it. Notice we didn't say master or even good, just not terrible. But here's why those first 20 hours matter so much. They're where most people quit. The beginning is awkward and frustrating, and you sound bad or look clumsy or feel stupid. But if you can push through, if you can front load those 20 hours into a short, concentrated period, maybe a few hours a day for a week or two, something magical happens. You break through that initial wall of incompetence fast enough that you don't lose heart. You get to the part where it starts feeling possible, even fun, before your motivation runs out. Think of it like launching a rocket. You need enormous energy just to break free of gravity. But once you're up there, in orbit, everything gets easier. Those first 20 hours, that's your launch sequence. Fact 4. Start with a tiny daily minimum. Now, 20 hours might sound like a lot, and here's where we get practical. You don't need to practice for hours every single day. In fact, trying to do that often backfires. Instead, set a minimum that's almost embarrassingly small. 5 minutes. Even 3 minutes if you need to. The magic isn't in the duration at first. It's in the consistency. See, when you set a tiny daily minimum, you remove the biggest obstacle to practice, which is the mental resistance to starting. Your brain doesn't rebel against 3 minutes. It's too small to argue with. And here's the beautiful part. Once you start, you almost always do more than your minimum. But even on the days you don't, even on those exhausted evenings where you really do just practice for 3 minutes, you've kept the chain unbroken. You've told your brain this matters. You've made learning part of who you are, part of your daily rhythm. Like brushing your teeth. Small, consistent, inevitable. Fact 5. Use emotional hooks to make skills memorable. Learning isn't really about information. It's about memory. And memory doesn't work the way we often think it does. Your brain doesn't carefully file away everything you practice. It's selective. It remembers what matters emotionally. So if you want to learn quickly, you need to make your practice emotionally resonant. Maybe you're learning a song on piano. Don't just play scales. Play a piece that means something to you, that connects to a memory or a person you love. Learning a language? Don't memorize generic phrases from a textbook. Learn how to say things you actually want to say. How to talk about your interests, your life, your stories. The emotional hook is like a tag your brain puts on information that says, keep this, it's important. Without emotion, practice is just repetition. With emotion, practice becomes part of your story. And stories, we remember those. Fact 6, sleep is part of practice. Here's something that sounds almost too simple to be true. But some of your best practice happens while you're sleeping. When you learn something new, especially a physical skill, your brain doesn't actually solidify those neural pathways during practice. It does it later, during deep sleep, in a process called consolidation. Your brain literally replays what you practiced, strengthening the connections, smoothing out the movements. This is why you sometimes wake up better at something than when you went to bed. It's not magic. It's neuroscience. So if you're learning quickly, respect your sleep. Don't sacrifice it for extra practice. Those extra hours won't help as much as you think. Instead, practice with intention, then rest well. Let your sleeping brain do its quiet, essential work. The learning is happening even in the dark, even in the stillness. Trust the process. Fact 7. Protect deep focus time. We live in a world of constant interruption. Phones buzzing, notifications pinging, people asking quick questions. And here's the hard truth. You cannot learn complex skills in that environment. Real learning requires deep focus, the kind where you're fully immersed, where time disappears, where your whole mind is engaged with what you're doing. Even a single interruption can shatter that state, and it takes many minutes to rebuild it. So if you're serious about learning quickly, you have to protect focus time like it's sacred. Turn off notifications. Close the door. Put your phone in another room. Tell people you're unavailable. It might feel extreme, but here's what happens. In 1 hour of true deep focus, you'll learn more than in 3 hours of distracted, fragmented practice. Protect that space. Guard it. It's where the real magic happens. Fact 8. Leverage peak. Energy windows. Your energy isn't constant throughout the day. You know this already. There are times when you feel sharp and focused, and times when you're just pushing through fog. Most people ignore this and practice whenever it's convenient. But if you want to learn quickly, pay attention to when your energy peaks. For many people, it's in the morning, maybe an hour or two after waking. For others, it's late afternoon or evening. Whenever it is for you, that's your golden hour for practice. That's when your brain is most receptive, most capable of forming new connections, most able to push through challenges. Use that time for your hardest, most important practice. Save the low energy times for review, for easy repetition, for things that don't require as much from you. Match your practice to your energy, and you'll learn faster with less effort. Fact 9. Audit energy leaks weekly. Here's a practice that might sound strange at first, but it's incredibly powerful. Once a week, sit down and audit where your energy is going. Not just physical energy, mental and emotional energy too. What's draining you? Maybe it's a commitment that doesn't serve you anymore. Maybe it's a relationship that's more exhausting than nourishing. Maybe it's hours scrolling through content that leaves you feeling empty. When you're trying to learn quickly, energy is your most precious resource. You can't create more hours in the day, but you can absolutely reclaim energy you're currently wasting. Look honestly at your week. What can you prune? What can you delegate? What can you simply stop doing? Every bit of energy you reclaim is energy you can pour into learning. Be ruthless. Be honest. Protect what matters. Fact 10. Regularly prune what's not working. And finally, this one's hard but essential. Not every technique works for every person. Not every approach will click with you. And that's okay. The mistake isn't trying something that doesn't work. The mistake is continuing to do it long after you know it's not helping. Maybe you bought a popular course that just doesn't match your learning style. Maybe you're using a practice method that frustrates more than teaches. Maybe you've been following advice that made sense to someone else but doesn't fit you. Let it go. Prune it away. Learning quickly isn't about being stubborn. It's about being adaptive. Try things. Assess honestly whether they're working. Keep what helps. Drop what doesn't. There's no prize for suffering through methods that don't serve you. Your goal is progress, not punishment. So regularly, maybe every couple of weeks, look at what you're doing and ask, is this actually working? If not, it's time to try something else. So there it is. The mindset shift. You don't need talent. You really don't. You need clarity about where you're going. Focus on one thing at a time. Energy to fuel the journey. And the wisdom to protect all three. That's the foundation. That's where fast learning begins. Not with some special gift you were born with, but with choices you make every single day. Now, let those thoughts set. Act 2, setting the game board. Let's continue this journey. And now we're going to talk about something that might seem counterintuitive. The fastest learners don't rush into practice. They set up the game board first. Fact 11. Remove friction before you start. Imagine you want to learn guitar. You're excited, motivated, ready to go. But here's what often happens. The guitar is in a case, in the closet, upstairs. To practice, you have to decide to practice, then go get it, then unzip the case, then find a pick, then remember where you put that tuning app. By the time you've done all that, some of the energy has leaked away. Maybe you check your phone while you're getting set up. Maybe you realize you need to do something else first. This is friction. And friction kills learning faster than almost anything else. So before you start learning a new skill, spend time removing every bit of unnecessary friction. Put the guitar on a stand where you walk past it every day. Set up your drawing supplies on a dedicated table, ready to go. Lay out your running clothes the night before. Make practice the path of least resistance. Because here's the truth. Willpower is a limited resource. Don't waste it on logistics. Save it for the actual learning. Fact 12. Map dependencies first. Every skill has hidden prerequisites. Things you need to know before other things make sense. And one of the biggest mistakes slow learners make is diving into advanced material before they've built the foundation. Fast learners do something different. Before they start, they map out the dependencies. They ask, what do I need to learn first to make everything else easier? If you're learning to code, maybe you need to understand variables before functions. If you're learning to cook, maybe you need knife skills before complex recipes. If you're learning photography, maybe you need to understand exposure before you worry about composition. Take a step back. Look at the skill from above, like you're looking at a map. What's upstream? What unlocks what? Once you see the dependencies clearly, you can create a learning path that flows naturally, where each new thing builds on what came before. This isn't about being slow or methodical for its own sake. It's about being strategic. Building in the right order is always faster than building out of sequence. Fact 13. Break the skill into sub-skills. Here's something interesting. We often talk about learning guitar or learning Spanish as if they're single skills. But they're not. They're bundles of sub-skills. Guitar includes rhythm, melody, chord changes, strumming patterns, music theory, ear training. Spanish includes pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, listening comprehension, conversation flow. When you break a skill down into its component parts, something magical happens. The overwhelming thing becomes manageable. You can practice individual subskills in isolation, get good at them one at a time, then weave them together. It's like the difference between trying to juggle 5 balls on day 1 versus learning to juggle 1 ball, then 2, then 3. The end result looks the same, but the path is so much more achievable. So take your skill and break it apart. What are the actual component pieces? List them. Then you can practice them deliberately, systematically, without getting lost in the complexity of doing everything at once. Fact 14. Front-load fundamentals before fancy tricks. There's a natural human tendency to want to jump to the cool stuff. When you start playing guitar, you want to play songs, not practice chord changes. When you learn a language, you want to have deep conversations, not drill verb conjugations. And while it's important to keep learning fun and motivated, there's a trap here. The fancy tricks, the impressive stuff, they're all built on fundamentals. And if you skip the fundamentals to get to the exciting parts, you end up with a shaky foundation that limits how far you can go. Fast learners have a different approach. They front-load the fundamentals. They spend more time at the beginning on the boring, basic building blocks than seems necessary. And what happens is this. Because their foundation is so solid, everything else comes faster. Those chord changes you practiced until they were smooth, now learning new songs takes a fraction of the time. That verb conjugation you drilled, now you can experiment with sentences without constantly looking things up. The fundamentals are called fundamental for a reason. They're the leverage points. Master them first, and everything else becomes easier. Fact 15. Learn the key vocabulary early. Every skill has its own language, its own terms, concepts, jargon. And here's something that slow learners often miss. Struggling with the vocabulary makes learning the actual skill so much harder. You're in a photography tutorial and they mention aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and you have to pause and look each one up. You're reading about cooking and they reference braising, deglazing, emulsifying, and you're lost. This creates cognitive overload. You're trying to learn the skill while simultaneously trying to decode the language being used to teach it. Fast learners do something smart. They learn the key vocabulary early, separately from practicing the skill itself. They make flashcards. They watch beginner videos that explain terms. They create a personal glossary. Once the vocabulary is familiar, everything else flows. You can read tutorials without constantly stopping. You can ask better questions. You can think about the skill more clearly because you have precise words for the concepts. Language unlocks learning. So don't treat vocabulary as something you'll pick up along the way. Treat it as one of your first deliberate learning tasks. Fact 16. Use if-then rules for common situations. As you're learning a skill, you'll notice that certain situations come up again and again. In chess, certain opening positions. In cooking, certain flavor combinations. In conversation, certain types of questions. And your brain loves patterns. It loves rules it can apply quickly without having to think through everything from scratch. So as you practice, create simple if-then rules for these common situations. If I see this pattern in chess, then I move here. If a sauce is too acidic, then I add sweetness or fat. If someone asks me where I'm from, then I respond with this phrase in Spanish. These rules act like shortcuts. They free up mental space so you can focus on the harder, more novel aspects of the skill. You're not reinventing the wheel every time a common situation appears. You have a rule. You apply it. And over time, these rules become automatic, intuitive. They sink into muscle memory or intuition. But at first, make them explicit. Write them down. Practice them until they stick. Rules bring order to chaos. And chaos is what makes learning feel overwhelming. Fact 17. Use constraints to focus. Here's a paradox. Freedom makes learning harder. When you have infinite options, you waste energy deciding what to practice. When you can do anything, you often do nothing particularly well. Constraints, on the other hand, force focus. And focus accelerates learning. So create artificial constraints for yourself. If you're learning to draw, maybe spend a month drawing only with pencil, no color. Just one medium, deeply explored. If you're learning to write, maybe write only 100-word stories for a while. The constraint forces you to work within a box, and working within a box develops mastery faster than dabbling across the full spectrum. Photographers who shoot only in black and white for a year develop a better eye for composition because color can't carry the image. Musicians who practice only scales for a month develop finger dexterity that serves them forever. The constraint isn't a limitation, it's a focusing lens. Choose your constraints wisely, and they'll accelerate your learning far beyond what unlimited freedom ever could. Fact 18. Create skill fuses. Here's a clever concept. A skill fuse is when you combine a new skill with something you already do regularly. You're fusing the new behavior to an existing habit. Maybe you practice pronunciation while you're driving to work. Maybe you do drawing exercises while you listen to podcasts. Maybe you practice chord progressions during TV commercial breaks. The existing habit becomes the trigger for the new practice. This works because you're not trying to build a new routine from scratch. You're piggybacking on something that's already automatic. Your brain already knows, when I get in the car, I do this. Now you're just changing what this is. Skill fuses reduce friction and increase consistency. They turn dead time into practice time. They make learning feel less like an extra burden and more like a natural part of your day. Look at your current routines. What are you already doing every day? Now, what could you fuse to those moments? Fact 19. Use concrete, time-boxed projects. Learning in the abstract is hard. Learning toward a specific concrete goal is much easier. Instead of saying you're learning photography, say you're going to create a 10-photo series about your neighborhood by the end of the month. Instead of learning to code, say you're going to build a simple website for your friend's business in 3 weeks. The project gives you a finish line. It forces you to make real decisions and solve real problems, which is where the deepest learning happens. And the time box creates healthy urgency. You can't perfect everything, so you focus on what matters most. You ship something imperfect but real, and real things teach you more than theoretical practice ever could. The project becomes a container for your learning. It organizes your practice. It gives you momentum. And when you finish, you have something tangible. Not just skill points in your head, but an actual thing you made. That feeling of completion, of creation, that fuels the next project and the next. Always be working towards something concrete. Fact 20. Seed space challenges. Here's how memory really works. You don't remember things by repeating them over and over in a short burst. You remember things by encountering them repeatedly over increasing intervals of time. This is called spaced repetition, and it's one of the most powerful learning techniques we know. But here's the thing. Most people don't do it because they don't plan for it. They learn something once and hope it sticks. Fast learners seed spaced challenges into their practice from the beginning. They create flashcards or reminders to revisit concepts. They schedule review sessions. They deliberately circle back to earlier material, even when it feels like they've moved on. This feels inefficient at first. Why review what you already learned? But what's actually inefficient is learning something, forgetting it, and having to learn it again from scratch later. Each time you recall something you have forgot and bring it back to mind, you're strengthening that memory exponentially. Space your challenges. Plan to forget and relearn. That's not a flaw in the system. That's how the system works best, and there it is. The game board set. Fast learners don't just practice harder. They design smarter systems before they even begin. They remove friction, map the territory, build the foundation deliberately. They create rules, constraints, projects, structures that make learning feel less like swimming upstream and more like floating downstream with intention. The current is there. The skill wants to be learned. You just have to set things up so the path is clear. Now breathe. Let these ideas settle. And rest. Act 3. How practice actually works. Let's go deeper now. Into the heart of learning itself. Because here's something most people get wrong. They think practice is about time spent, hours logged, repetitions completed. But that's not quite right. Practice isn't time spent. It's mistakes corrected. Fact 21. Practice deliberately, not mindlessly. There's a world of difference between practice and deliberate practice. Regular practice is when you run through the motions. You play the song you already know. You repeat the exercise the same way you did yesterday. You're moving, but you're not really learning. Deliberate practice is different. It's intentional. It's focused on a specific aspect you're trying to improve. You're not just playing the song. You're working on that one transition you keep messing up. You're not just writing. You're focusing on making your dialogue sound more natural. Deliberate practice requires full attention. It requires you to notice what's happening, to identify what needs work, to adjust. It's mentally exhausting because you're actually engaging with the difficulty rather than coasting. And here's the thing. 10 minutes of deliberate practice will teach you more than an hour of mindless repetition. So when you sit down to practice, have a clear intention. What specifically are you working on right now? Not getting better at guitar, but smoothing out that G to C chord change. That specificity, that deliberateness. That's where learning lives. Fact 22. Practice. At the edge of your ability. Your brain learns most when it's challenged, just beyond what's comfortable. Not so far beyond that you're completely lost and frustrated. But just enough beyond that you have to stretch. This is called the learning edge, and finding it is an art. Too easy. And you're not building new neural pathways, you're just reinforcing old ones. Too hard, and you shut down, you get discouraged, you can't make any progress at all. The sweet spot is right at the edge where you succeed, maybe 70 or 80% of the time. You're making mistakes, but not constantly failing. You're challenged, but not overwhelmed. This is where growth happens. This is where your brain says, okay, I need to adapt. I need to get better at this. So pay attention during practice. If everything feels easy, you're in the comfort zone. Increase the difficulty. If everything feels impossible, you're in the panic zone. Pull back slightly. Find that edge. Live there. That's where transformation happens. Fact 23. Alternate. Difficulty levels. Here's something interesting. Practicing only at your edge, only in the struggle zone, actually isn't optimal. You need variation. You need to alternate between difficult practice that stretches you and easier practice that lets you experience flow and competence. Think of it like interval training. Hard bursts followed by recovery periods. When you alternate difficulty levels, a few things happen. First, the easier practice gives you wins. It reminds you that you are actually getting better, which maintains motivation. Second, it gives your brain time to consolidate what you learned during the hard stuff. And third, when you come back to the difficult material after some easier practice, it often feels more manageable. Your unconscious mind has been processing in the background. So structure your practice sessions with variety. Start with a warm-up that's easy, move into challenging new material, then end with something you're good at. Or alternate days. Hard practice one day, easier review the next. The rhythm of challenge and recovery creates sustainable, effective learning. Fact 24. Alternate. Learning and performance modes. There are two different modes of engaging with a skill, and they serve different purposes. Learning mode is exploratory. You're trying new things, making mistakes, experimenting, being clumsy. There's no audience, no pressure. You're in a workshop tinkering. Performance mode is different. You're executing what you already know. You're putting it all together. You're showing up, whether that's literally performing for others or just testing yourself. Both modes are essential, but they're different, and mixing them up causes problems. If you're always in learning mode, you never get the experience of actually doing the thing for real. You're forever a student, never a practitioner. If you're always in performance mode, you never take the time to identify weaknesses and work on them deliberately. You just keep repeating the same mistakes. So consciously switch between modes. Have practice sessions that are pure learning, messy, experimental, low stakes. And have sessions or moments where you perform, where you play the song all the way through, where you have that conversation in Spanish, where you write the actual article. Both modes teach you different things. Both are necessary. Fact 25. Shorten feedback. Cycles with small chunks. One of the biggest factors in how fast you learn is how quickly you get feedback. If you practice something and don't find out whether you did it right for days or weeks, you can't adjust. You might be practicing the wrong way, reinforcing bad habits. But when feedback is immediate, you can correct course instantly. So the question becomes, how do you shorten feedback cycles? The answer is to work in small chunks. Don't practice a whole song. Practice one measure at a time. Don't write a whole essay. Write a paragraph and evaluate it. Don't build a whole app. Build one feature and test it. Small chunks give you tight feedback loops. You try something, you immediately see if it worked, you adjust, you try again. This is the engine of rapid improvement. It's not glamorous. It feels slower because you're not covering as much ground. But paradoxically, you learn much faster because you're constantly correcting, constantly refining. Break things down. Make the feedback loop as tight as possible. That's where precision develops. Fact 26. Get fast, honest feedback. Not all feedback is created equal. The best feedback is fast so you can correct immediately. Honest, so you know what's actually happening rather than what people think you want to hear. And specific, so you know exactly what to adjust. Unfortunately, a lot of feedback we get in life is slow, polite, and vague. So you have to be strategic about seeking good feedback. Sometimes this means recording yourself and watching it back. Brutal, but honest. Sometimes it means finding a coach or mentor who will tell you the truth. Sometimes it means using tools or systems that give objective data. If you're learning a language, conversation with native speakers gives better feedback than a textbook. If you're learning to sing, recording yourself is better than relying on how it feels. If you're learning to code, running the program and seeing if it works is better than just reading about programming. Seek feedback sources that are immediate and objective. And when you get feedback, resist the urge to defend or explain. Just listen. Just absorb. The feedback is information. Use it. Fact 27. Learn by doing the real thing. There's a myth that you need to prepare extensively before you actually do the thing. That you need to read all the books, watch all the tutorials, understand all the theory. Before you write your first line of code, before you have your first conversation in Spanish, before you cook your first meal. But here's what actually works better. You learn by doing the real thing messily from early on. Sure, a little preparation helps. But at some point, you have to jump in. You learn to swim by swimming, not by reading about swimming. You learn to code by writing broken code and fixing it. You learn languages by having awkward conversations. The real thing teaches you in ways that preparation never can. It shows you what you actually need to know, which is often different from what you thought you needed. It gives you context that makes the theory suddenly make sense. It builds confidence through experience, not through intellectual understanding. So yes, prepare a little. But then, do the thing, imperfectly, clumsily. Do the actual thing you're trying to learn, not the sanitized practice version. That's where real learning happens. Fact 28. Use just-in-time resources. Here's a trap many learners fall into. They front-load enormous amounts of information before they need it. They buy courses and books and watch hours of tutorials about every aspect of a skill, trying to absorb it all up front. The problem is, most of it doesn't stick because you have no context for it yet. You don't know why it matters or when you'd use it. Fast learners use a different approach. Just-in-time learning. They learn what they need, right when they need it. They're building a project and hit a problem they don't know how to solve. Now they look it up. Now they watch the tutorial. Now they read the documentation. And because they need it right now, because they have a specific problem to solve, it sticks. The information has immediate relevance. It goes from abstract to concrete instantly. So resist the urge to learn everything up front. Instead, start doing and learn as you go. When you hit a wall, that's the moment to seek resources. Just in time. That's when your brain is most ready to absorb it. Fact 29. Copy, then create. Originality is overrated, especially when you're learning. Before you can create something original, you need to understand what good looks like. You need to internalize the patterns, the techniques, the structure. And the fastest way to do that is to copy. Not plagiarize, but copy as a learning exercise. If you're learning to write, copy out passages from writers you admire, word for word, to feel how the sentences flow. If you're learning to code, type out working programs line by line to understand how they're structured. If you're learning to draw, recreate other people's work to understand their technique. Copying teaches you things that just looking or reading never could. You notice details you would have missed. You feel the choices being made. And gradually, as you copy, you start to understand why things work. You develop taste and intuition. And that's when you can start to create. Creation comes after copying, not before. Learn the language by imitating others. Then speak in your own voice. Fact 30. Fade the scaffold. When you're first learning something, you need support structures. Training wheels, templates, step-by-step instructions. Someone showing you exactly what to do. These scaffolds are essential at the beginning. They prevent you from being overwhelmed. They guide you through the process. But here's the crucial part. Scaffolds are meant to be temporary. As you develop competence, you need to gradually remove them. Take away the training wheels. Work without the template. Try to solve the problem before looking at the solution. This is called fading the scaffold, and it's where independence develops. If you keep the scaffolds forever, you never build true skill. You become dependent on the support. You can do the thing, but only with help. Real mastery means you can do it on your own, without the guide, without the template, without someone watching over your shoulder. So as you practice, consciously reduce the support. Challenge yourself to do it with less help. It will feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is growth. That's you building real internalized skill rather than just going through motions. Someone else designed that, so there it is. How practice actually works. Not hours logged mindlessly. Not time served. But focused attention at the edge of your ability. Immediate feedback on small chunks. Doing the real thing, messily. Copying until you can create. Building scaffolds and then letting them fade. Practice isn't about volume. It's about precision. It's about mistakes noticed and corrected over and over, until the mistakes disappear and what's left is skill. Now, let that settle. Let your mind rest with these ideas. Breathe and drift. Act 4. Memory and retention. We're moving into something essential now. Because here's a truth that might sting a little. If it doesn't stick, you didn't really learn it. You can practice something 100 times, but if you forget it a week later, what was the point? So let's talk about how to make learning permanent. Fact 31. Use spaced repetition. Not cramming. Your brain has a funny relationship with time. When you cram information all at once, studying intensely for hours in one sitting, it feels like you're learning a lot. You're focused, you're absorbed, information is flowing in. But here's what research shows. Most of that doesn't stick. Within days, you've forgotten the majority of it. The brain doesn't store information well when it's dumped in all at once. What actually works is the opposite. Spaced repetition. You learned something today. Review it tomorrow. Review it again 3 days later. Then a week later. Then 2 weeks later. Each time you recall something you're on the verge of forgetting, you strengthen that memory exponentially. It's like a path through the woods. Walk it once, and the grass springs back. Walk it repeatedly over time, and eventually you have a permanent trail. This feels slower and less impressive in the moment, but it's dramatically more effective over time. The skills you want to keep, the knowledge you want to retain. Space it out. Let time be part of the learning process. Fact 32. Test yourself instead of rereading. Here's something most people do when they want to remember something. They reread it. They review their notes. They go over the material again. It feels productive. It feels like studying. But here's what cognitive science tells us. Rereading is one of the least effective ways to remember something. It creates an illusion of knowing. You recognize the material when you see it, so you think you know it. But recognition isn't the same as recall. What actually works much better is testing yourself. Close the book. Try to remember the information. Try to explain the concept without looking. Try to solve the problem from memory. This is harder. It feels less comfortable. You'll struggle. You'll forget things. You'll feel like you don't know it as well as you thought. But that's struggle. That's the learning. Every time you force yourself to retrieve information from memory, you're strengthening the pathway to that information. So flip your study approach. Don't reread. Test. Quiz yourself. Recall. Retrieve. That's how memories become permanent. Fact 33. Teach what you just learned. There's an old saying, you don't really know something until you can teach it. And it turns out this is neuroscience, not just folk wisdom. When you teach something, you're forced to organize the information clearly. You have to understand it well enough to explain it. You have to anticipate questions and confusions. All of this deepens your own understanding in ways that passive learning never could. So here's a powerful technique. After you learn something new, find a way to teach it. Explain it to a friend. Write a blog post about it. Record yourself giving a tutorial. Even just explaining it out loud to yourself, as if you were teaching an imaginary student. The act of teaching forces you to process the information differently. You notice gaps in your understanding. You have to make it coherent and logical. And in doing that, you solidify it in your own mind. The best way to learn something deeply is to prepare to teach it to someone else, even if you never actually teach it. Preparing to do so transforms how you understand it. Fact 34. Compress explanations. Here's a fascinating exercise. Try to explain something complex in just 1 or 2 sentences. No more. This is harder than it sounds. When you know something well, you can usually talk about it for a while, adding details and nuance and caveats. But can you compress it down to its absolute essence? This practice, compression, is incredibly valuable for learning. When you force yourself to distill an idea to its core, you have to identify what really matters, what's essential versus what's supplementary. And in doing that, you understand the concept at a deeper level. You move from knowing a bunch of facts to understanding the underlying principle. So as you learn, practice compression. After reading a chapter, try to summarize it in one sentence. After learning a technique, try to explain why it works in 10 words or less. This isn't about oversimplifying. It's about finding the heart of the idea. Once you can compress something, you truly understand it. And compressed ideas are much easier to remember than long, detailed explanations. Fact 35. Extract one-liners. Related to compression is this idea. Every skill, every domain, has key insights that can be captured in memorable one-liners. Little phrases or rules that encapsulate important principles. In photography, it might be something like light is everything. In writing, show, don't tell. In business, solve problems people actually have. These one-liners aren't the whole story, of course, but they're incredibly valuable as mental shortcuts, as anchors for more complex understanding. Fast learners actively extract and collect these one-liners. When they encounter a useful principle or insight, they distill it into a memorable phrase and write it down. Over time, they build a personal library of these nuggets. And in moments of practice or application, these one-liners bubble up. They guide decisions. They keep you on track. They remind you what matters. So as you learn, be a collector. When you encounter wisdom, distill it. Create your own one-liners. Make them sticky and memorable. These become the foundation of your intuition in that domain. Fact 36. Use analogies to connect to what you know. Your brain learns new things by connecting them to things you already know. It's not building from scratch. It's linking, associating, mapping new information onto existing mental models. And one of the most powerful ways to do this is through analogy. When you encounter something new, ask yourself, what is this like? What does this remind me of? If you're learning about electrical circuits and current flow, it's like water flowing through pipes. If you're learning about memory consolidation, it's like wet cement that needs time to harden. The analogy gives you a framework, a structure you already understand that you can use to make sense of the new information. And good analogies make things memorable. You might forget the technical explanation, but you'll remember the water pipe analogy. And that's often enough to reconstruct the understanding. So actively create analogies as you learn. Make them vivid and concrete. The stranger or more memorable, the better. Your brain will thank you by actually retaining the information instead of letting it slip away. Fact 37. Stack micro wins daily. Motivation is fragile. It comes and goes. What keeps learning going isn't motivation. It's momentum. And momentum comes from wins. Small, daily wins. This is why tracking your progress in small increments is so powerful. You practiced for 10 minutes today. That's a win. You learned 5 new words. That's a win. You completed one small project. That's a win. Each win, no matter how small, gives you a little hit of accomplishment. And those hits accumulate. They build confidence. They create the feeling that you're moving forward, which makes you want to keep moving forward. This is why tiny daily minimums work so well. They guarantee you get at least 1 win per day. And 1 win per day stacked over weeks and months. That's hundreds of wins. That's momentum that becomes unstoppable. So don't wait for big victories. Celebrate the micro wins. Stack them daily. Let them build into something larger than you imagined possible at the start. Fact 38. Track progress visibly. There's something powerful about seeing your progress externally, not just feeling it internally. When you track your learning in a visible way, a chart on the wall, a journal, a spreadsheet, an app, it makes progress real, concrete, undeniable. You can look back and see how far you've come. This serves multiple purposes. First, it's motivating. On days when you feel like you're not improving, you can look at the data and see that you are. Second, it creates accountability. The act of tracking makes you more likely to actually practice because you want to have something to record. And third, it gives you information. You can see patterns. You can notice when you make breakthroughs. You can identify what's working and what isn't. So find a way to make your progress visible. It doesn't have to be fancy. A simple calendar where you mark each day you practice. A notebook where you write what you learned. The medium doesn't matter. What matters is that you can see your journey laid out in front of you. Progress you can see is progress you can believe in. Fact 39. Benchmark against yesterday. Here's a trap. Comparing yourself to others. To the expert who's been doing this for years. To the talented person who seems to pick things up effortlessly. That comparison is poison. It makes you feel inadequate. It makes you want to quit. So don't do it. Instead, benchmark against yesterday. Against last week. Against who you were when you started. Are you better than you were yesterday? Even a tiny bit? Then you're winning. That's the only comparison that matters. This shifts your mindset from fixed to growth. Instead of, I'm not as good as them, it becomes, I'm better than I was. That's sustainable. That's encouraging. That's true. You can't control how talented you are or how fast others learn. But you can absolutely control whether you're improving compared to your past self. Make that your benchmark. Make that your metric for success. Am I better than yesterday? If yes, keep going. Fact 40. Track lag metrics. Here's something subtle but important. There are 2 types of metrics. Lead metrics, which measure actions you take, like hours practiced or pages read. And lag metrics, which measure results, like songs you can play or conversations you can have. Most people track lead metrics because they're easier. You know how many hours you practiced. But lead metrics don't tell you if you're actually improving. Lag metrics do. So periodically, maybe once a week or once a month, test yourself on lag metrics. Can you actually do the thing better than before? This is your reality check. It's possible to practice a lot and not improve if you're practicing wrong. Lag metrics reveal that truth. They keep you honest. If your lag metrics aren't improving, something needs to change in your approach. And when they are improving, when you can do things now you couldn't do a month ago, that's real validation. So track both. Track your actions, yes, but also track your results. Make sure the actions are translating into actual skill. So there we have it. How to make learning stick. Not just pass through your mind for a moment, but embed itself permanently. Space your practice over time. Test yourself ruthlessly. Teach it to others. Compress it down to its essence. Connect it to what you already know. Stack tiny wins daily. Make progress visible. Compare yourself only to who you were before. And track whether you can actually do the thing, not just whether you practiced. Memory isn't magic. It's a process, a system. And when you understand the system, you can make anything stick. Let these ideas settle now. Let them find their place in your mind. Rest, breathe, and drift onward. Act 5, Error Hacking and Adaptability. Now we enter the acceleration phase, where learning gets really interesting. Because here's a truth that changes everything. Mistakes aren't setbacks. They're instructions. Fact 41. Batch similar errors. When you're practicing something and you make a mistake, most people just move on. Maybe they try again, maybe they don't. But here's what fast learners do differently. They notice patterns in their mistakes. They see that they're not making random errors. They're making the same type of error repeatedly. Maybe when you're learning Spanish, you keep forgetting the gender of nouns. Maybe when you're learning piano, you keep rushing the tempo on faster passages. Maybe when you're coding, you keep forgetting to close parentheses. These aren't isolated mistakes. They're patterns. And patterns can be addressed systematically. So start batching your errors. Keep a list. When you make a mistake, write it down. After a week or a practice session, look at the list. What categories emerge? What's the common thread? Once you see the pattern, you can create targeted practice specifically for that type of error. You're not just fixing individual mistakes anymore. You're eliminating entire categories of mistakes. That's exponentially more efficient. Batch your errors. Find the patterns. Address the roots, not just the symptoms. Fact 42. Build failure maps. Here's a powerful visualization technique. Create a map of where you fail, literally. If you're learning a piece of music, mark on the sheet music exactly where you stumble every time. If you're learning a language, keep track of which types of sentences trip you up. If you're learning to draw, note which aspects. Perspective, proportions, shading consistently give you trouble. Over time, this creates what we might call a failure map, a visual representation of your weak points. And here's what's beautiful about this. It transforms vague frustration into concrete information. You're not just bad at Spanish. You're specifically struggling with subjunctive verb forms. You're not just not good at drawing. You're specifically having trouble with foreshortening. And concrete problems have concrete solutions. You can focus your practice. You can seek specific resources. You can measure improvement in those exact areas. Your failure map becomes your practice roadmap. It tells you exactly where to put your effort. Build it, update it. Watch it change as you improve. Fact 43. Revisit the same core problems in new ways. There are usually a handful of core challenges in any skill. Fundamental difficulties that most learners encounter. And here's something interesting. Working on the same problem from different angles teaches you more than drilling it the same way over and over. Maybe you're struggling with rhythm and music. You could practice clapping rhythms, or counting out loud, or using a metronome, or listening to songs and tapping along, or watching videos that visualize rhythm. Each approach activates different parts of your brain, creates different connections, and together they build a more robust, flexible understanding than any single approach could. So when you identify a core problem, don't just drill it one way. Get creative. How many different approaches can you find? How many different angles can you attack it from? This variation prevents boredom, yes, but more importantly, it builds understanding that's deep and transferable. The problem becomes familiar from every side, and suddenly, it's not a problem anymore. Fact 44. Force variation early. When you're learning something new, there's a natural tendency to find one way that works and stick with it. One chord progression you can play. One type of sentence you can construct. One recipe you can cook. And while repetition has value, there's a trap here. If you practice only one variation, you become good at that variation. But you don't develop the underlying skill. You've memorized a pattern, but you can't adapt. So fast learners force variation early, before they're comfortable. They deliberately practice different versions, different contexts, different scenarios. Learning guitar? Don't just play one song over and over. Learn pieces in different keys, different tempos, different styles. Learning a language? Don't just memorize set phrases. Try expressing the same idea in multiple ways. This feels harder. It's less comfortable than perfecting one thing, but it builds adaptability from the beginning. It teaches you the principles, not just the pattern. And that flexibility, that's what lets you apply the skill in the real world, where nothing ever matches the practice scenario exactly. Fact 45. Invert the skill occasionally. Here's a strange but powerful technique. Occasionally practice a skill backwards or inverted. If you're learning to read music, try writing music. If you're learning a language, try translating from that language to your native language instead of the other way around. If you're learning to code, try reading and understanding someone else's code instead of writing your own. Inversion reveals aspects of the skill you might not otherwise notice. When you reverse the direction, you see the structure from a different perspective. You develop a more complete understanding. It's like the difference between climbing a mountain and descending it. You're on the same mountain, but the view is completely different and you notice different things. So periodically, invert your practice. Do it backwards. Do it inside out. See what you learn. The insights might surprise you. Fact 46. Practice in reverse. Similar, but more literal. Actually practice things in reverse order. If you're learning a speech or presentation, start by practicing the ending first, then the middle, then the beginning. If you're learning a song, start with the last phrase, then the second to last, working backwards. If you're learning a routine or sequence, reverse it. This does something interesting. Normally, we practice from the beginning, so the beginning gets the most practice and becomes the strongest. The ending gets the least practice and stays the weakest. But in performance or application, you need the whole thing to be strong. Practicing in reverse balances this out. It ensures the ending is as solid as the beginning. It also prevents you from always relying on momentum to carry you through. You have to truly know each part independently. So try it. Start from the end. Work backwards. Your overall mastery will be more complete and more reliable. Fact 47. Calibrate with ghost reps. Ghost reps are practice repetitions where you don't actually do the thing. You just imagine doing it. Mental rehearsal. Visualization. You close your eyes and vividly imagine playing that chord progression, having that conversation, executing that movement. And here's what research shows. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between vividly imagined practice and actual practice. The neural pathways still fire. The patterns still strengthen. Obviously, ghost reps can't replace actual practice entirely, but they're incredibly valuable for calibration, for refining your mental model of what you're trying to do, for practicing when you don't have access to the actual tools or environment. Athletes use this constantly, visualizing the perfect throw, the perfect swing. Musicians mentally rehearse performances. You can do this too. When you can't practice physically, practice mentally. See yourself doing it correctly. Feel it, hear it. Ghost reps keep the neural pathways warm and give you something productive to do during downtime. Fact 48. Audit attention drift. Here's something subtle but important. During practice, your attention wanders. Your mind drifts. You're going through the motions, but you're not fully present. This is normal, human, inevitable. But it's also where learning stops. When you're on autopilot, you're not encoding new information. You're just repeating what's already automatic. So periodically during practice, maybe every 10 minutes or so, pause and audit. Where was my attention just now? Was I fully engaged, or was I drifting? If you were drifting, that's not a moral failure. It's just information. Bring yourself back, reset, engage again. Over time, this practice of noticing when attention drifts actually strengthens your ability to maintain focus. You catch the drift earlier. You wander less. Your practice becomes more concentrated and more effective. The audit is simple. Just notice. Where was I? Am I here now? That small act of metacognition of thinking about your thinking, transforms practice from mechanical repetition into active learning. Fact 49. Weaponize wait time. There are moments in life where you're waiting. Waiting in line. Waiting for an appointment. Waiting for water to boil. Most people treat these moments as dead time. They check their phone. They zone out. But these moments are opportunities. Small pockets of time where you could practice. Not everything requires tools or setup. You can practice vocabulary while waiting. You can mentally rehearse conversations or presentations. You can visualize techniques or movements. You can review concepts in your head. Each moment is small, yes. Maybe just 2 or 3 minutes. But these moments add up. 5 minutes here, 3 minutes there. Over a week, that's significant practice time you would have otherwise lost. So weaponize wait time. Don't let it slip away unused. Have something you can practice that requires no tools, no setup. And when those moments appear, and they will appear multiple times every day, use them, not frantically, not stressfully, just use them. That's found time. That's free practice. Fact 50. Hunt hidden patterns. Every skill has surface patterns. The obvious things everyone notices. And hidden patterns. The subtle things that experts know but rarely articulate. And finding those hidden patterns can accelerate your learning dramatically. So become a pattern hunter. Watch experts carefully. What are they doing that they're not talking about? What tiny adjustments? What small habits? Read between the lines in tutorials. What's implied but not stated? Look at your own practice. Are there correlations you haven't noticed? Maybe you practice better at certain times. Maybe certain warm-ups lead to better sessions. Maybe specific types of practice have outsized effects. These patterns are there, but you have to look for them actively. Keep a journal. Take notes. Ask questions. Compare yourself now to yourself a month ago. What changed? Not just what you practiced, but how you practiced. The hidden patterns once found are leverage points. They're shortcuts. They're the difference between someone who's been practicing for years and someone who gets good fast. Hunt the patterns. Find the hidden structure. That's where the magic is. And so we arrive at something profound. Mistakes aren't obstacles to overcome. They're the curriculum itself. Each error is information. Each failure is feedback. When you learn to work with your mistakes instead of against them, when you batch them, map them, revisit them from every angle, when you force variation and practice backwards and hunt for patterns, you're not just learning faster, you're learning smarter. You're turning the difficulty itself into fuel. The struggle becomes the teacher. And suddenly, the learning accelerates in ways that surprise even you. Let that sink in now. Let the wisdom of working with errors, not against them, settle into your bones. Rest here, breathe, and continue to drift. Act 6. Thinking like an expert. We're reaching the advanced territory now, where learning becomes something more. where you shift from being someone who's learning a skill to someone who operates with that skill naturally. Because here's the secret. Experts see patterns beginners can't. Fact 51. Reverse engineer experts. When you watch an expert, what you see is the performance, the finished product, the smooth execution. But what you don't see is the thinking behind it, the decisions, the principles, the hundreds of micro choices they're making that look effortless because they've become automatic. So here's what fast learners do. They reverse engineer experts. They don't just watch and admire. They dissect and analyze. Why did they do that? What were they responding to? What principle guided that choice? You watch a chef and they add salt at a specific moment. Why then and not earlier? You watch a coder structure their program in a certain way. What's the reasoning? You listen to a skilled conversationalist redirect a discussion. What technique was that? The more you can see beneath the surface, the more you can extract. Don't just consume expertise. Decode it. Take it apart. Understand the architecture of their thinking. That's what you're really learning. Fact 52. Mirror. Top performers. There's something powerful about imitation. Not copying outputs, but mirroring process. Find someone who's excellent at what you're learning. Maybe someone you know personally, maybe someone you can watch online, and study how they work. Not just what they produce, but their actual workflow. How do they start? How do they structure their practice? What do they do when they get stuck? What's their rhythm, their routine? Then, try mirroring it. Adopt their process, at least temporarily. Work the way they work. Think the way they think, as much as you can tell. You might find that some of it doesn't fit you. That's fine, adapt. But you'll also find elements that transform your own practice. Little habits or approaches you never would have thought of on your own. Top performers have figured things out through years of experience. By mirroring them, you compress that learning curve. You inherit their wisdom. You borrow their patterns. And gradually, those patterns become yours. Fact 53. Cross-pollinate skills. Here's something fascinating. Skills aren't isolated islands. They connect. They inform each other. And often, being good at one thing gives you unexpected advantages in learning another. Maybe you learned music, and the sense of rhythm and pattern helps you learn programming. Maybe you learned martial arts, and the body awareness helps you learn dance. Maybe you learned writing, and the ability to structure ideas helps you learn public speaking. These connections aren't always obvious at first. But when you actively look for them, when you ask yourself, what do I already know that's relevant here? You find bridges. And those bridges make learning faster. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from your existing foundation and extending it. So don't compartmentalize your skills. Cross-pollinate them. Let them feed each other. The more connections you make, the richer and more robust your learning becomes. Fact 54. Create skill. Sandwiches. Here's a clever technique for maintaining multiple skills without losing momentum on any of them. A skill sandwich is when you alternate between a skill you're actively developing and skills you're maintaining. Maybe you're intensely learning Spanish right now. That's your focus. But you also know guitar and don't want to lose it. So you create a sandwich. 30 minutes of Spanish practice, then 10 minutes of guitar maintenance, then back to Spanish. Or you're learning to code and you sandwich in drawing practice to keep those skills warm. The main skill gets the bulk of your attention, but you're not completely abandoning other skills. You're keeping them alive with maintenance doses. This prevents the common problem where you focus intensely on one thing and watch all your other skills atrophy. The sandwich structure lets you have a primary focus while protecting your broader skill base. It's not perfect for every situation, but when you want to develop one skill deeply without losing others, the sandwich works beautifully. Fact 55. Use debt scheduling. Sometimes when you're learning, you encounter something you don't understand. A concept that's too advanced. A technique that's beyond you right now. And there's a temptation to stop everything and figure it out immediately. But sometimes, that's not the right move. Sometimes the better approach is to acknowledge the gap, mark it as debt, and schedule it for later. You literally write it down. I don't understand this yet. I'll come back to it in 2 weeks. And then you keep moving forward with what you can understand now. This might seem counterintuitive. Shouldn't you understand everything as you go? But here's what happens. Sometimes understanding comes with context. Sometimes you need to learn things that come later before the earlier thing makes sense. And sometimes, trying to force understanding prematurely just creates frustration and stalls your momentum. Debt scheduling lets you keep moving while acknowledging what you need to circle back to. You're not ignoring the gap. You're being strategic about when you address it. And often, when you do come back to that marked debt, you find it's much easier to understand now than it would have been before. Fact 56. Seed chain reactions. Here's an advanced move. Identify skills or knowledge that unlock multiple other things. These are keystone skills. Learn them, and suddenly a whole category of related skills becomes accessible. Maybe in cooking, learning knife skills properly unlocks dozens of recipes. Maybe in music, learning to read sheet music opens up an entire library of pieces. Maybe in business, learning basic accounting unlocks financial understanding across multiple domains. These aren't just skills. They're keys. They're chain reactions waiting to happen. So when you're planning your learning, look for these leverage points. What's the one thing that if you learned it well, would make 10 other things easier? That's where to put your focus first. That's how you create exponential progress rather than linear progress. One skill that seeds chain reactions across your learning landscape. Find it, master it. Watch everything else become easier. Fact 57. Shadow sessions. Shadow session is when you practice alongside an expert, mimicking their actions in real time. Not taking over, not even participating necessarily. Just shadowing. Following along. Doing what they do as they do it. If you're learning to code, maybe you watch a programmer work and you type out the same code they're typing at the same pace. If you're learning cooking, Maybe you follow a recipe video and cook exactly alongside them. If you're learning music, maybe you play along with a recording, matching their tempo and phrasing. Shadow sessions create a direct neural connection between observation and action. You're not passively watching and then trying to remember later. You're actively doing, guided by someone who knows what they're doing. This builds muscle memory and intuition faster than studying alone. You inherit their rhythm, their flow, their decision-making process by moving with them. So find opportunities to shadow. Work in parallel with experts whenever you can. Let their competence guide your hands and mind. Act 7, Automation and Long-Term Speed Script Segment, approximately 15 minutes. We arrive now at the final layer, mastery, the long game. Because here's a truth that matters more than almost anything else. Speed that burns out isn't speed. Real mastery is about sustainable momentum that compounds over time. Fact 61. Embrace overlearning basics. There's a point in learning where something becomes easy. You can do it reliably. You understand it. And most people stop there and move on to the next thing. But here's what masters do differently. They keep practicing the basics long after they're good enough. They overlearn them. They practice fundamentals until they're not just automatic, but bulletproof. Until they could do them in their sleep, under pressure, when distracted. Why? Because when basics are truly automatic, they free up mental bandwidth for everything else. A musician who has overlearned scales doesn't think about finger positions during a performance. A writer who has overlearned grammar doesn't waste mental energy on sentence structure while creating. The basics become the foundation you never have to think about, which means you can think about the creative, complex, interesting parts instead. So don't rush past the fundamentals once you can do them. Live there longer than feels necessary. Overlearn them until they're woven into your nervous system. That's the foundation of all advanced work. Fact 62. Create habit. Momentum through chains. Habits are powerful because they remove decision-making. You don't have to motivate yourself to brush your teeth. You just do it. It's automatic. And you can use this principle to make practice automatic too. The key is chains. You link your practice to something you already do reliably. After coffee, you practice for 10 minutes. After lunch, you review flashcards. Before bed, you do your exercises. The existing habit becomes the trigger for the new behavior. And once the chain is established, once the link is solid, you don't think about whether to practice. It just happens. The coffee finishes and your hand reaches for the guitar. That's habit momentum. It's not willpower. It's not motivation. It's just the next thing that happens. Building these chains takes time. Maybe a few weeks of conscious effort. But once they're built, they carry you forward with almost no effort. Practice becomes as automatic as the existing habit it's chained to. That's sustainable speed. Fact 63. Turn decisions into rules. Every decision costs mental energy. Should I practice today? For how long? What should I work on? These micro decisions accumulate. They create friction. They drain the finite resource of willpower. So smart learners eliminate as many decisions as possible by turning them into rules. Not flexible guidelines, hard rules. I practice every day at 7 a.m. for 30 minutes. I always start with fundamentals. I always end sessions by reviewing what I learned. Rules eliminate decision fatigue. You don't decide each day whether to practice. The rule decides for you. You just execute. This might sound rigid, but it's actually liberating. The mental space freed up by not making the same decisions over and over can go into the actual learning. And over time, following the rules becomes its own habit. The rules fade into the background. They just become how you do things. So look at your practice. What decisions are you making repeatedly? Turn them into rules. Make them automatic. Fact 64. Reduce cognitive load. Intentionally. Your brain has limited processing capacity at any given moment. When you're learning something complex, it's easy to overload that capacity. You're trying to remember technique while also thinking about theory, while also monitoring your performance, and everything suffers because your attention is fractured. So intentionally reduce cognitive load. Take some things off the table temporarily. If you're learning a complex piece of music, maybe you focus purely on getting the notes right first. Don't worry about expression or dynamics yet. Those come later. If you're learning a language, maybe you focus on basic communication before you worry about perfect grammar. One thing at a time. Get it solid. Then add the next layer. This staged approach might feel slower in the moment. You're not doing everything at once, but you're actually learning faster because your brain can fully focus on one thing at a time. And each layer, solidified before adding the next, creates a more stable foundation. Reduce the load. Let your brain breathe. Learn in layers. Fact 65. Build consistency before intensity. There's a common mistake. People start learning with intense bursts of effort. They practice for hours every day, for a week. Then they burn out and stop. And all that intense effort evaporates. What actually works better is the opposite approach. Start with consistency, even if it's low intensity. Practice for just 10 minutes every day. Every single day. Build the habit first. Build the consistency. Make it sustainable. Make it something you can maintain for months or years, not just weeks. Then, once consistency is established, once practice is woven into your daily life, you can gradually increase intensity. Add 5 more minutes, then 10. But the foundation is consistency. Because here's the truth. 10 minutes every day for a year is vastly more effective than 2 hours a day for a month, followed by nothing. Consistency compounds. Intensity burns. Build the one before you add the other. Fact 66. Use environment as a coach. Your environment shapes your behavior more than you probably realize. If healthy food is visible and junk food is hidden, you eat healthier without trying. If your guitar is on a stand in your living room, you play more often than if it's in a case in the closet. Your environment coaches you, either toward your goals or away from them. So design your environment intentionally. Make the desired behavior easy and visible. Make distractions hard and hidden. Want to practice drawing? Keep a sketchbook and pencil on your desk, always ready. Want to learn programming? Have your development environment set up to launch with one click. Remove friction from what you want to do. Add friction to what distracts you. Your environment should be conspiring to help you, not sabotaging you. Look around you right now. Is your space set up to support your learning? If not, change it. That's one of the highest leverage moves you can make. Fact 67. Protect recovery like training. Here's something that sounds counterintuitive but is absolutely critical. Rest is part of training. Recovery is when adaptation happens. When your brain consolidates what you learned. When your body rebuilds stronger. When integration occurs. If you practice relentlessly without rest, you don't learn faster. You learn slower. You get fatigued. You make more mistakes. You burn out. So protect recovery like it's sacred. Sleep enough. Take rest days. Build breaks into your practice sessions. Honor the fact that your brain and body need time to process and integrate. This isn't laziness. This isn't lack of commitment. This is understanding how the system actually works. The athletes who perform best aren't the ones who train hardest without stopping. They're the ones who train hard and recover well. Same with learning. The intensity of your recovery should match the intensity of your practice. Both matter. Both are essential. Protect them equally. Fact 68. Designed for boredom resistance. Let's be honest. Learning the same skill for months or years can get boring. The initial excitement fades. The novelty wears off. And boredom is one of the biggest reasons people quit. So you need to design for boredom resistance from the beginning. Build variety into your practice. Alternate between different aspects of the skill. Work on different projects. Change your practice environment occasionally. Find communities of other learners to stay engaged with. Set new challenges regularly. Keep some element of novelty in the mix. This doesn't mean chasing shiny objects or abandoning focus. It means understanding that human brains crave variety and novelty, and working with that reality instead of pretending you're immune to boredom. You're not. Nobody is. So design your learning system to stay interesting over the long haul. That's sustainability. That's what allows you to keep going when others quit. Fact 69. Optimize for sustainability. Everything we've talked about in this final act comes down to one word: sustainability. Can you keep doing this? Not for a week, not for a month, but for years? Because that's how mastery happens. Not through intense bursts that flame out, but through consistent effort over time. So every choice you make about your learning should pass through this filter. Is this sustainable? If you're practicing 3 hours a day, but you're exhausted and resenting it, that's not sustainable. If you're using a method that works but makes you miserable, that's not sustainable. If you're sacrificing sleep or health or relationships for learning, definitely not sustainable. Find the pace and approach you can maintain long term. Maybe it's slower than you'd like. Maybe it's less intense than what some expert recommends. That's okay. What matters is that you're still doing it next year. And the year after. Sustainable speed beats unsustainable intensity every single time. Optimize for the long game. Fact 70. Speed compounds over time. And here we reach the final insight. The one that ties everything together. Learning isn't linear. It's exponential. When you first start, progress feels slow. You're building the foundation. You're learning the basics. It takes a lot of effort for small gains. But here's what happens if you stick with it, if you maintain that sustainable pace. The gains start to compound. The fundamentals you overlearned unlock advanced techniques more quickly. The patterns you learned in one area transfer to another. The systems you built keep working in the background. Your rate of improvement accelerates. You learn the 10th thing faster than you learned the first thing. And the 100th thing faster than the 10th. This is compounding. This is why consistency over time beats intensity in bursts. This is why masters keep getting better while others plateau. They've been in the game long enough for compounding to take effect. So trust the process. Trust that small, consistent improvements stack. Trust that speed builds on speed. What feels impossibly slow today becomes effortlessly fast tomorrow. If you stay in the game long enough to let the compounding work its magic. That's the promise. That's the path. Sustainable effort, compounding results over time. And so we close this journey through learning. From mindset to mastery. From clearing false beliefs to building systems that compound. You've traveled through preparation, practice, memory, error correction, expert thinking, and finally, automation and sustainability. 70 insights. 70 pieces of a larger whole. The truth is simple, even if the path is long. You don't need special talent to learn quickly. You need clarity, systems, consistency, and patience. You need to work with how your brain actually works, not against it. You need to build for the long term, not just the short burst. And if you do these things, if you apply even a fraction of what you've heard here, you'll find that learning becomes less of a struggle and more of a flow. Less of a mystery and more of a system. Less about who you are and more about what you do. So rest now. Let all of this settle. Let it integrate into your understanding. And when you wake, you'll have everything you need to learn whatever you want to learn. The knowledge is yours now. The path is clear. All that remains is to begin. Sleep well. Dream of what you'll become. And know that it's all within reach. Act 8. Set the foundation script segment. Approximately 12 minutes. But before you begin that journey, let's talk about something crucial. Because speed doesn't start when you pick up the instrument or open the book. Speed starts before practice even begins. Fact 71. Map. Dependencies first. Imagine trying to build a house starting with the roof. Sounds absurd, right? Yet that's exactly what many learners do. They dive into advanced material before understanding what needs to come first. Every skill has an architecture, a structure of dependencies where some things must be learned before others make sense. And the fastest learners pause before they start. They map the territory. They ask, what do I need to know first? What unlocks what? If you're learning photography, maybe you need to understand exposure before you worry about composition. If you're learning to code, maybe you need variables before functions. If you're learning music, maybe you need rhythm before melody. This isn't about being slow or methodical for its own sake. It's about being strategic. When you map dependencies first, you create a learning path where each step builds naturally on the last, where nothing feels like it came out of nowhere, where understanding flows instead of fighting you. So before you practice, map, see the structure, know the sequence. That clarity alone will save you weeks of confusion. Fact 72. Leverage peak energy windows. Your energy isn't constant. You know this. There are hours when you feel sharp, focused, capable. And there are hours when you're just tired. Most people ignore this and practice whenever it's convenient, whenever they remember, whenever they can squeeze it in. But here's the thing. All practice hours are not created equal. An hour of practice during your peak energy window is worth 2 or 3 hours when you're depleted. Your brain absorbs more. You focus better. You make fewer mistakes. You learn faster. So pay attention to your own rhythms. When do you feel most alert? For many people, it's in the morning, that first couple hours after waking. For night people, it might be evening. Whenever it is for you, that's gold. That's your learning window. Protect it. Use it for your hardest, most important practice. Save the low energy times for review, for easy repetition, for things that don't demand your best. Match your practice to your energy, and you'll learn faster with less total effort. Fact 73. Audit energy leaks weekly. Energy is finite. And here's what most people don't realize. They're hemorrhaging energy in dozens of small ways they're not even aware of. Commitments that drain them. Relationships that exhaust them. Habits that steal mental bandwidth. Time sinks that give nothing back. When you're trying to learn quickly, you can't afford these leaks. You need every bit of energy you can get. So once a week, sit down and audit honestly. Where did your energy go this week? What left you feeling drained? What was worth it and what wasn't? This isn't about becoming selfish or cutting everything from your life. It's about being intentional, about protecting your capacity to do what matters most. Maybe you realize you're spending hours on social media that leave you feeling empty. Maybe there's a weekly obligation you've been doing out of guilt rather than genuine care. Maybe you're saying yes to things you should be saying no to. Find the leaks. Patch them. Reclaim that energy. Pour it into your learning instead. Fact 74. Seed-spaced challenges. Memory works through repetition over time. Not cramming, spacing. You learn something today. You need to revisit it tomorrow, then in 3 days, then in a week, then in 2 weeks. Each time you recall something you're on the verge of forgetting, you strengthen that memory exponentially. But here's the problem. Most people don't plan for this. They learn something once and hope it sticks. It doesn't. So seed-spaced challenges from the beginning. Create flashcards. Set calendar reminders. Schedule review sessions. Build the spacing into your system before you start learning. This feels like extra work up front. It is, but it saves enormous work later. Because learning something once and reviewing it strategically is so much more efficient than learning it, forgetting it, and having to relearn it from scratch multiple times. Seed the challenges. Plan to forget and remember. That's not a bug in how memory works. That's the feature. Use it. Fact 75. Create skill fuses. Skill fuse is when you attach new practice to something you already do reliably every day. You're not creating a new routine from nothing. You're piggybacking on an existing habit. The existing habit becomes the trigger. Maybe you practice pronunciation during your morning commute. Maybe you do drawing exercises while you drink your coffee. Maybe you review vocabulary while you're waiting for dinner to cook. The beauty of skill fuses is they turn dead time into practice time. They reduce friction because you're not having to remember to practice. It just happens as part of something you already do. And they're sustainable because they don't feel like an extra burden. They're woven into the fabric of your existing day. So look at your current routines. What do you already do every single day? Now, what could you fuse to those moments? What small practice could ride along? That's free practice. That's momentum you don't have to create from willpower alone. Fact 76. Use debt scheduling. Sometimes, you'll encounter something you don't understand. A concept that's too advanced right now. A technique that's beyond your current level. And there's a temptation to stop everything and figure it out immediately. To refuse to move forward until you understand completely. But sometimes, that's the wrong move. Sometimes understanding requires context you don't have yet. Sometimes things make sense only after you've learned what comes next. So here's the strategy. Acknowledge the gap. Mark it as debt. Literally write it down. Don't understand this yet. We'll revisit on this date. Then keep moving forward. You're not ignoring it. You're being strategic about when you address it. And often, when that scheduled date arrives and you return to the debt, it's suddenly much clearer. Because you have context now. Because your brain has been processing in the background. Because you've learned things that make this thing make sense. Debt scheduling prevents you from getting stuck. It keeps momentum while still ensuring nothing falls through the cracks. Fact 77. Trigger flow entry. Flow is that magical state where you're completely absorbed, where time disappears, where the work feels effortless, where learning accelerates dramatically. But flow isn't random. It has conditions. It requires challenge that's balanced with skill. Not too hard, not too easy. It requires clear goals. It requires immediate feedback. It requires zero distraction. Once you know the conditions, you can create them deliberately. Before each practice session, set a specific goal. What exactly are you working on? Eliminate every possible distraction. Phone off. Door closed. Notifications silenced. Choose a task that stretches you but doesn't break you. Set up feedback loops so you can tell immediately whether you're doing it right. And then, begin. Not every session will hit flow, but you're stacking the conditions in your favor. And when flow does arrive, those sessions are worth 10 normal sessions. So learn to trigger it. Create the conditions. Invite the state. That's when learning moves from work to play. Fact 78. Stack micro wins daily. Momentum doesn't come from big victories. It comes from small, consistent wins that accumulate. Practiced for 5 minutes today? Win. Learned 3 new words? Win. Completed 1 small exercise? Win. Each tiny win matters. Each one gives you a small hit of accomplishment, a little boost of confidence. And those hits stack. They compound. They create the feeling of forward motion, which makes you want to keep moving forward. This is why tiny daily minimums work so well. They guarantee at least 1 win per day. And 1 win per day over weeks and months. That's hundreds of wins. That's unstoppable momentum. So don't wait for the big breakthrough. Don't save celebration for major milestones. Celebrate the micro wins. Stack them daily. Let them build into something larger than you could imagine when you started. Because here's the secret. The micro wins are what actually create the major milestones. They're not separate things. The small victories are the path to the big ones. So before you ever practice, before you ever start, set the foundation. Map where you're going. Protect your energy. Leverage your best hours. Seed the repetitions you'll need later. Fuse practice to existing habits. Plan for what you don't understand yet. Create conditions for flow. Stack daily wins. This preparation. This setup. This is where speed actually begins. Not in the grinding practice hours, but in the intelligent design of the system before you even start. Get this right, and everything that follows becomes easier. Skip this, and you'll be fighting uphill the whole way. The choice is yours. But know this: the fastest learners aren't the ones who practice hardest. They're the ones who set up the game board before they play. Now rest with this knowledge. Let it settle. And know that when you're ready to begin, you'll begin with wisdom. Sleep now. The foundation is set. Act 9. Practice that actually works script segment. Approximately 12 minutes. Now that the foundation is set, let's talk about what happens when you actually practice. Because here's something most people get wrong. Practice isn't repetition. Practice is precision. Fact 79. Fade the scaffold. When you're first learning something, you need support. Training wheels on a bike. A template for writing. Step-by-step instructions for a recipe. Someone showing you exactly what to do. These scaffolds are essential at the beginning. They prevent overwhelm. They guide you through the process. But here's the crucial part. Scaffolds are temporary. They're meant to be removed gradually as you develop competence. If you keep them forever, you never build true skill. You become dependent. You can do the thing, but only with help. Real mastery means you can do it alone, without the guide, without the template, without someone watching. So as you practice, consciously reduce support. Take away one piece of the scaffold at a time. Try it without looking at the instructions. Try it without the model to copy. It will feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is growth. That's you building real, internalized skill rather than just following someone else's path. Fade the scaffold. Build independence. That's where true capability lives.